You never expect your own child to shoot you in the neck, but that's exactly what happened one quiet afternoon in Mississippi. A 14-year-old girl who seemed to have everything going for her: good grades, a loving family, a promising future, picked up a .357 Magnum and opened fire on her own mother. Then, just minutes later, she turned the gun on her stepfather. What could drive a teenager to do something so dark? Today's story is a tale of falling apart, a slow descent hidden by smiles and academic honors, until the day it all exploded. And the most haunting part? Her mother never saw it coming. Ashley and her daughter Carly Gregg have always been close. In fact, most people would describe their relationship as unusually strong. They're not just mother and daughter, they're best friends. Ashley is a high school math teacher in Brandon, Mississippi, a small community where everyone tends to know everyone else. She's smart, calm, warm, and proud of Carly. And Carly? She's gifted, smart, artistic, maybe a little quirky. But that never bothered anyone. Not at first, but as we often learn in these situations, what you see on the outside isn't always the whole picture. Carly's early years weren't easy. Her biological father struggled with serious drug addiction and was diagnosed with serious mental health conditions, including schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. His marriage to Ashley was tumultuous and violent. Carly, then just a toddler, watched her mother get bruises on her face, her arms, her neck. There were nights when Ashley would run away from home in the middle of the night with Carly in tow. Eventually, the couple divorced. Carly visited her father a few times a month, but she didn't enjoy those visits. His moods were erratic, sometimes cold and withdrawn, other times openly angry. Worse, he drove like a maniac, and Carly later admitted that even as a child, she was terrified of dying in a car with him. Not just of him, but of becoming him. Because, of course, she knew that mental illness could be hereditary. So could addiction, and Carly wasn't without loss. When she was 4, her younger sister, just 18 months old, died. Even though Carly was still very young, the grief had left a deep mark on her. Her mother describes Carly as a surprisingly well-adjusted child, but looking back, cracks had already formed. Despite everything, Carly did well in school. In fact, she was so much better than her peers that she skipped 3rd grade. When Ashley married her second husband, Heath Smiley, and moved the family to a comfortable house in Brandon, it seemed like things were finally settling down. On the surface, they were a normal middle-class family, but behind closed doors, Carly began to change. She was kicked out of 7th grade for bringing a Swiss Army knife to school. No one knew why she had brought it. Some said it was an innocent mistake, others weren't so sure. Whatever the reason, it was one of the first warning signs. Then, in high school, things really started to go wrong. At Northwest Rankin High School, where her mother taught geometry, Carly initially thrived. During her freshman year, she was even named Student of the Year. But just a year later, things took a turn for the worse. She started vaping, smoking weed, texting friends on her disposable phone, keeping secrets. And she started keeping a journal, pages and pages of strange, creepy thoughts. One entry listed her core beliefs: there was no God, no heaven or hell, and everyone could write their own destiny. She called fire beautiful and deadly and powerful. Another entry simply said, "You don't need family." Another, "It's okay to do evil." These weren't just teenage thoughts. They were flashing warning lights. But Ashley didn't know about the magazines or the disposable phone. Or the drugs. She did, however, notice that Carly had suddenly cut off her long blonde hair, something she had always been proud of. Concerned, Ashley even asked her, half-jokingly, if she was trying to act like a boy. Carly told a friend that her new haircut made her look even gayer. It wasn't clear whether it was a question of identity or just teenage exploration. But Ashley was concerned, so she did what any loving parent would do. She sought help for her daughter. Carly started seeing a therapist named Rebecca Kirk. And Kirk didn't seem particularly worried. Yes, Carly had anxiety. Yes, she was dealing with depression. But Kirk said she was coping pretty well. When Zoloft stopped working, however, Carly was switched to another antidepressant, Lexapro. And then, just days before everything collapsed, her mood took a turn for the worse. By mid-March 2024, Carly's friends were really worried. One of them, concerned about her erratic behavior, convinced another student to distract her at school so he could speak directly to her mother. That's how Ashley discovered her daughter was smoking pot and acting strangely, and on Tuesday, March 19th, things came to a head. That morning, Carly had gotten into an argument with the same friend who had tattled to her mother. In front of a group of other students, she cursed him out. But the rest of the day went like any other. Around 3:30 p.m., Carly and Ashley left school together, just like they did almost every day. There was no sign of tension. No yelling. No slamming doors. Nothing, but by 4 p.m., Ashley would be lying bleeding on her bedroom floor. Here's what happened. According to investigators, when she got home, Carly went straight to her mother's bedroom. She reached under the mattress and pulled out the .357 Magnum that had been kept there for the family's protection. She shoved it behind her, walked through the kitchen, and paused to look into the hallway to make sure her mother hadn't left the bedroom. Then, without warning, she walked into the room and fired one shot. Then another. Then a third. The sound of gunfire shattered the quiet house. Carly ran. She ran out the back door. Her dogs followed her, barking and panicking. And then she did something cold. She grabbed one of the house's security cameras and stuffed it in the refrigerator, like she knew exactly what she was doing. Then, when her stepfather Heath came home just a few minutes later, she tried to shoot him too. So let's go back to that moment. Carly had just shot her mother. 3 times. In her own bedroom. The dogs were barking. Carly was panicking. But she wasn't acting like someone who had just lost control. No, she was thinking. Planning. She ripped one of the house's security cameras off the wall and hid it inside the refrigerator, almost as if she knew what was on it. Almost as if she was trying to erase the evidence. Then she waited. But not long after that, because a few minutes later, her stepfather, Heath Smiley, pulled into the driveway. Completely unaware that his wife was dying inside, and Carly thought she was right there waiting for him, he walked in the front door, and that's when he saw her. Her eyes were wide. Her body was tense. She was holding a gun. He didn't even get to finish his sentence before she mentioned it. Heath later told the police that Carly looked unrecognizable. Like something had taken over her. She was screaming, but he couldn't even understand what she was saying. All he knew was that she was pointing the gun at his head, and then she pulled the trigger, but this time, something was wrong. Maybe she hesitated. Maybe he moved. Maybe it was just chaos. But Heath lunged at her, and in the struggle, he got hold of the gun. He wrenched it out of her hand and slammed the door behind him, locking her out of the house, but she had already fired. And Heath had been shot, grazed in the neck, the bullet tearing through muscle. He staggered onto the front porch, covered in blood, in shock, and called 911. Here's part of that call. Dispatcher, what's your name? Heath, Smiley. Heath Smiley. I was shot in the neck a little. Dispatcher, who shot you? Heath, Carly. Carly Gregg. My stepdaughter. She ran into the backyard. I think the gun's still on the kitchen counter. When the police arrived, Heath was still on the porch, alive, but barely able to keep his balance. Paramedics took him to the hospital. And the search for Carly began, but this wasn't a high-speed chase. Carly didn't get far. Less than a mile from the house, the police spotted a girl walking alone. Calm. Quiet. It was Carly. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She didn't even look surprised when they handcuffed her. Body camera footage of the arrest shows her wiping her hands on her jeans and quietly asking, "Is my stepfather okay?" The cop replied, "I don't know, honey. I can't talk to you about that right now." They gently placed her in the back of the patrol car. She didn't struggle. She didn't even blink. Now remember, Carly was only 14. But what had just happened wasn't a little mistake, wasn't teenage angst. This was attempted murder. And that's exactly what the prosecutors charged her with: 1 count of first-degree murder for her mother's death. And 1 count of attempted murder for shooting Heath. They also charged her with a 3rd count, tampering with evidence. Remember that security camera she hid in the refrigerator? That's right, it went undetected at the first trial. The courtroom was tense. Because the story didn't make any sense. How could a talented, driven, seemingly loving 14-year-old react like that? What was that about? Carly's lawyers argued for a psychiatric evaluation, and the judge agreed. Meanwhile, Carly was held without bail. The prosecution offered a plea deal, 40 years in prison, with the chance of being released at some point. But her defense team wouldn't take it. They believed she was sane. That she needed treatment, not punishment. But here the case got even murkier. When investigators searched Carly's room, they found more than just diaries and disposable phones. They found drawings, lists, phrases written over and over like mantras. One said, "It's okay to be evil." Another said, "You don't need a family." Cold? Yes. But also incredibly sad. And then there was the therapist's testimony. Rebecca Kirk, the woman who had been treating Carly for weeks, sometimes even days, before the shooting, took the stand. What she said stunned everyone. She told the court that Carly had never been violent, never expressed anger toward her mother, never threatened. In fact, their last session, the day before the shooting, had been completely normal. Carly seemed tired, yes. A little bored. But not unsettled. Not dangerous. No voices. No anger. Just a teenage girl struggling with anxiety and depression. So how do we explain what happened? The defense leaned toward a mental health story. They argued that Carly was suffering from a serious, undiagnosed mental illness. Maybe even bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Maybe schizophrenia. Her family history certainly made that a possibility. An expert, Dr. Andrew Clark, evaluated Carly after her arrest and testified that she had been hearing voices. Voices that told her she was better than everyone else. That made her feel powerful. that whispered destructive things. He also said that Carly had a severe sleep disorder, that she smoked marijuana regularly, that she had even started self-harming. And then there was the change in medication from Zoloft to Lexapro just a week before the shooting. Dr. Clark claimed that the change could have completely destabilized her. But here's the thing, Carly never told anyone else about the voices. Not her friends. Not her mother. Not even her therapist, and the prosecution didn't believe it. They said Carly knew exactly what she was doing. That she wasn't confused. That she wasn't hallucinating. She planned the shooting. She hid the gun. She took down the security camera. And then, she didn't panic, she just walked away, calm as ever. They argued that this wasn't psychosis. This was premeditated murder. Then came one of the most moving moments of the entire trial. Heath Smiley, the stepfather Carly tried to kill, testified. He didn't get angry. He didn't scream. He didn't describe Carly as a monster. Instead, he cried. He looked straight at Carly in the courtroom. And then, through trembling lips, he said the words, "I love you." He told the court that Ashley loved her daughter very much. Carly was everything to her. No matter what happened, they would do anything for her. And yet, he loved her. That's when the reality of the tragedy became clear, not just to the jury, but to everyone watching. This was more than just a murder. This was a family torn apart. A home destroyed not by a stranger, but from within. The trial of Carly Gregg captivated the courtroom and the surrounding community in a way few cases ever do, not just because of the horror of what happened, but because of who suffered. And who sat at the defendant's table, a handcuffed 14-year-old girl accused of killing her mother and attempting to kill her stepfather. The prosecution and the defense told two very different stories. Prosecutor Catherine Whitenaman described Carly as deliberate, calculating, and dangerous. Not just an out-of-control teenager, but a teenager who knew exactly what she was doing. In her closing statement, she did not waver. She told us what her purpose was, the prosecutor said. You don't need a family. It's okay to be evil. She pointed to Carly's journal entries. Her fascination with fire. Her belief that heaven and hell were myths. Her own words, "You write your own destiny." The prosecutor argued that Carly's thinking was no accident. That this was not the product of a psychotic episode, but a girl who had been slipping into a dark world for months, unchecked. She reminded the jury that Carly had taken down the security camera and confronted Heath Smiley with a gun. And she insisted, "We may never know why. But we know what. And what is murder?" And the defense, they leaned heavily on the insanity side. They brought in a psychiatrist. They brought in Carly's personal therapist. They read her journal entries aloud not as evidence of intent, but as a cry for help. Her attorney stood up and made it clear to the jury. Carly Gregg loved her mother. And her mother loved her. That love wasn't a show. It was real. Something happened to Carly's mind. And no one saw it coming. They didn't argue that Carly didn't pull the trigger. They argued that she wasn't in control of what she was doing when she pulled the trigger, but the prosecution pushed back hard. They questioned why Carly never mentioned the voices to anyone except a psychiatrist after she had been arrested. They said this wasn't a story about a girl losing control of her reality. This was a story about a teenager who was falling apart and who made the choice to end it all in a destructive act. Then, in a final emotional blow, the prosecution returned to 3 words Carly had written in her journal: permission to be evil. The jury deliberated. The court waited, and then the verdict came: guilty, guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of attempted murder, guilty of tampering with evidence. Carly Gregg, who was only 15 at the time of the verdict, was given 2 life sentences, to run concurrently, plus 10 years for tampering with evidence. And there was one more devastating detail: no chance of parole. As the judge read the verdict, Carly finally broke down. Her shoulders slumped. Her face contorted. She cried, and you had to wonder if, in that moment, she had thought about the plea deal her defense had rejected months earlier: 40 years. It would be a long time, but one day she might get away with it. Now, that day would never come. There is something haunting about this case that lingers long after the hammer has come down. Because no matter how you look at it, whether you see a cold-blooded killer or a mentally ill teenager who got away with it, one thing is undeniable: 3 lives ended that day. Ashley Smiley, mother, teacher, caregiver, was shot to death by the person she loved most. Heath Smiley, her husband, survived, but will be scarred for the rest of his life, both physically and emotionally. And Carly? She's still alive. But the life she might have had, her college years, her career, her family, even her chance at redemption, that life ended the moment she pulled the trigger. What makes this case so hard to handle isn't just the violence, but the personal nature of it. The betrayal. The confusion. The way everything that seemed solid: love, family, trust, was erased in a matter of seconds. And through it all, those who loved Carly never stopped loving her. Her stepfather, Heath, took the oath. Her grandparents came to court to support her. Even Ashley, according to everyone who knew her, adored Carly to the core. So, how are we supposed to understand it? Is this justice? Is it punishment? Is it the only option? There are no easy answers. There is only this: a bright, beautiful girl who scored 30 on the ACT when she was 13 now spends the rest of her life behind bars. A mother is dead. And a family is broken beyond repair. It's a reminder that behind the most unimaginable crimes there is often a long story. Of pain, of mental illness, of missed signs, and sometimes, the people we think we know best are the ones suffering in silence.